I am Quentin Collins, Assistant Director of LaSalle University's Solstice MFA and Creative Writing program. Welcome to our May 2022 virtual alum reading, featuring 4 of our graduates who have recently published books. As we open this virtual space, I would like to note that we acknowledge that the territory on which LaSalle University stands is that of the Pawtucket and the Massachusetts people. LaSalle's campus is a place to honor and respect the history and continued efforts of the Native and Indigenous community leaders which make up Eastern Massachusetts and the surrounding region. This statement is one small step in acknowledging the history that brought us to reside on the land, and to help us seek understanding of how our place within that history. Ownership of land is itself a colonial concept. Many tribes had seasonal relationships with the land we currently inhabit. Today, Newton, Massachusetts is home to the indigenous peoples, including the Nipmuc Nations and the Massachusetts peoples. For more information, please visit the Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness and the Commission on Indian Affairs of the State of Massachusetts. Tonight's reading features our graduates Joanne Carota, Estela Gonzalez, Alison McLennan, and Mike Miner. I will introduce each reader, and then they will read for 10 minutes. Throughout their readings, we will post links to where you can purchase their books in the chat. We will begin with Joanne. Joanne Carota is the author of The Docks, a salty story set on a fish pier in South Boston from Neptune Books. She teaches writing at UMass Lowell and holds an MFA in fiction from Solstice. Favorite pastimes include spending time with family, now including granddaughter Olivia, who has more books than the average baby. And now I turn the virtual floor over to Joanne.
Welcome, and I think you can hear the baby in the background, so there's not much I can do about it. I apologize. It's great to see everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to give you a little quick synopsis, not take up too much time. Kate Finn is a marine biologist, 27 years old. She works out of fish pier for contracts to the FDA to assure that fish is okay to eat. And one Sunday morning, while she slept in her office the night before, she took a little walk on the docks and found somebody dead, not just somebody, but her father's best friend, Sammy. And there was a codfish stuck in his jacket, and he had all green all over him. And so the mystery ensued. So this part is that I'm reading is chapter 4. Kate heads down to Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute to try to get to the bottom of some testing, because she stole a sample of fish off of Sammy before the police came. So she's going to Cape Cod, Falmouth, Woods Hole. Kate Finn approached the Goslings' driveway, framed by quiescent roses. Their brilliant pink flowers bloomed fully in July, but until then, they were sealed tight. The house was invisible from the main road, and broken quahog shells covered the sandy driveway. The shells crunched under the tires of Kate's red Honda Accord. Branches brushed against her car as she turned the last curve to the gray shingled house regally staged upon the harbor. An unnamed Boston whaler was tied up at their dock. Haley Gosling stood looking out from the kitchen storm door. Haley walked toward Kate's car, smiling. "You made it early. I thought you were coming tomorrow. Let me help you with your bags." "I'm staying at the Naughty Sea, but thanks." They stood uncomfortably for a few seconds before they headed into the house. "Pierre is at your favorite spot. He should be back shortly." Cafe Woods in Woods Hole, where tourists hung out waiting for the ferry to go to Martha's Vineyard, served premium coffee. "I'm so sorry about your father's friend. Sammy was such a great guy." Kate nodded, "The best." She was feeling uncomfortable and falling into her old rumination. Even though they were the it couple, Haley should have checked in. After all, they were the closest of friends at UMass Boston, where they had met the first day in chemistry class. They were the smartest girls in the room. Kate checked herself, all in the past. "Hey, Katie, how are you?" Pierre Gosling burst into the kitchen, kissed Kate on her head, and placed the coffees on the granite counter. You said you were bringing some work down. Pierre opened the creamer and poured it into his coffee, spilling half of the cream on the kitchen counter. Damn it. Haley wiped up his mess. How come you told me Kate was coming tomorrow? Haley asked. Pierre shot his wife a look. I said she was coming on Friday. Haley shrunk. When did Pierre become so harsh? Where had the lovebirds gone? First, Kate wanted to comfort Haley. Then she wanted to get away from the tension in the room. Kate spoke up. So I have some samples to run. I just wanted to touch base before I checked in at Naughty C. Shall I meet you at Novska, Pierre? Later, he sipped his coffee. Kaylee glanced at her husband. Ed McGann called. Pierre's posture stiffened. Kate took a giant gulp of her coffee on the way out the door. Ed McGann, that name sounds so familiar, she shot back. Bye, Katie. He retreated into the study adjacent to the kitchen. I'm sorry. How'd that happen? Along the drive up the hill from Naughty Pine Inn, past the Regal Lighthouse, she looked down at the aqua rolling waves of Cove Beach. Around the bend from the lighthouse was a loose pebbled road where laboratory buildings hid. The shushing of smooth pebbles under her car's tires soothed her. Kate parked in a visitor's parking space. It seemed odd considering the long hours spent here. She walked around the building to the front entrance and entered the double doors into the waiting area. Excuse me, I don't think you belong here. Dr. Zion, I was hoping you would be here. Gently, he offered his hand. They shook for a long time. What brings you to Falmouth? The Gosling's clam bake combined with some work. She shifted her weight from side to side. Are you okay? She cocked her head. There was a tragedy in Boston. My father's best friend died, and I found him in his boat. Read about it. They found a large bloody fish inside his jacket. Something like that. Tragic. Zion shook his head back and forth multiple times. Then he lifted the cooler she'd left on her chair. Did you bring us lunch? I'm meeting Pierre to look at some samples. I'll take a look. Come on, Pierre will soon find you. In the large laboratory with testing stations ergonomically against the wall, she opened the cooler and took out 4 individually packed fish samples labeled by number. Sammy's fish was number 3. What's going on with this little fellow? He's practically a Martian. He guided Kate and sample 3 over to the spectrometer. Nothing unusual here for an old dead fish, except for its rare color. Let's check his levels. We'll use the ion exchanger. Dr. Zion prepared the sample. Okay, let's see what our specimen is working up for us. Holy Toledo, look at the levels of ammonium percolate pouring out of this guy. This stuff is used for rocket fuel. He could have blown up with these levels. But his green shade is quite odd. I haven't seen this before, ever. There must be something else mixed in to cause this green presentation. His chloroform levels were harmless, like what they use at grocery stores to preserve produce, Kate offered. I'm just the technician here, he said, but what's the story with the sample? I'm not sure yet, Kate said. It has to do with my father's friend. He put his hand up. What? This is a sample from the fish they found on Sammy's body. Are you authorized to have this, he asked. Self-authorized. I don't want to know anymore. Pack it up, Kate. I need to know what turned the fish green. For science, Dr. Zion? How is possessing illegal evidence helping science? He removed the fish particles from the test equipment and started to clean up. Sammy must have been into something. Now Kate felt like a betrayer. He had green stuff on his face and the fish so abnormal. Dr. Zion squinted. The shade looks like the color of one of those green apple martinis my daughter and her husband drink. Green teeny, Kate mimed. Drink at your own risk, but it may kill you. Her voice faltered. You know, his minimal fallout was suspicious. All the guys were calling him the Codfather. I should have looked closer. I could have caught something and Sammy would still be alive. By mid-afternoon the next day, the lobster bake was hopping. After stuffing herself full of lobster and clams, Kate sat lounging on the Gosling's boat, which was tied to the dock. Is that your boat, miss? The sun's glare blocked her vision. All she could see were blue dockers and boat shoes. Not mine. Want to take a spin in Buzzards Bay? I'll pass. He walked toward her with authority, twirling his Rolex. Have we met? She now realized he was Ed McGann. Seen you in town. How did I miss seeing you, he asked. Irish luck? I read about you and your work at Greeley Labs, Kate added. Ah, the Boston's business snoops. We didn't give permission for that piece. Kate was surprised to hear him dismiss the complimentary article. There you are. Did you have something to eat, Ed? Pierre guided the man off the docks, ignoring Kate. Hey, why are you pushing me away from your friend? So she remains my friend? The men laughed. McGann winked at her. She sat in the captain's chair, turning the steering wheel. Who is this man? Why was he everywhere? One thing was for sure. McGann was the man who visited Sammy at Fish Pier. Haley was plodding toward the boat when Kate's phone rang, a perfect opportunity to disengage Haley. She pulled it out of her jacket pocket. What's up? Pop got arrested. Michael, what are you talking about? Just get home. I'm here with Mom. Wait, why? They accused him of killing Sammy, and Pop was the last person seen with him. Said they were fighting next door at Merrill's Marina. Your dock detective madly came with some real cops. He snooped around in the house and then ransacked Pop's shed. Mom said they came out with 2 plastic-gallon jugs that looked like antifreeze. Asshole spilled some on the driveway. I already hosed it off. Michael never took a breath. Pop's being arraigned on Monday. Come home. Wait. But Michael had hung up, her legs fossilized as she tried to move off the dock. The past 2 weeks cascaded in her mind. She ran through her meetings with the police and assured herself that she'd given them no reason to suspect her father. Why would Pop and Sammy go to Merrill's Marina? Pop's Irish superstitions kept him away from the haunted Merrows. Hi-ho, Haley approached the boat with an unsteady gait. She took a long sip from a bottle of Perrier water. Too much wine last night, even for me. She advanced on Kate. What's wrong? You look sick. Green teeny, Pop's shed. Okay, what did you have to drink? Kate brushed by Haley, bolted up the hill, and floored her car away from the goslings. Thank you. We didn't get interrupted either.
Thank you so much, Joanne, for that wonderful reading. And now we are going to keep going right along to our next reader. Estela Gonzalez's novel, Arribada, published by Simran Press, was a finalist for Feminist Press's Louise Merriweather Award in 2019. Estela writes in English and Spanish about the liminal lives of LGBT individuals, sea turtles, monarch butterflies, and those whose cultures are seen as less. Her work appears in magazines and anthologies such as Barcelona Review, Best of Solstice, Coal Hill Review, La Colmena, Cobalt, Carnopio, Feminine Rising, Flash Frontier, Flyway, Label Me Latina, Letralia, Luvina, Resonancias, Revista de Lectura Mexicana Contemporánea, Sinister Wisdom, Solstice Selects, and Under the Volcano. Estela divides her time between Ajijic, Mexico, and Vermont, where she teaches Latin American literature and culture. She's currently finishing a collection of stories titled The Age of Aquarius. Her new project is a novel and short stories about Mazatlan's ghost. And now, Estela.
Thank you so much. I am super excited to be here, and sorry for the tongue twisters there, Quentin. You did great. I'm going to start with the beginning of my novel, and I'm just going to start you without any explanations because it's the first page. It's just 2 little pages, and then I'll tell you more about it later. So I'm going to read 2 different parts. Musnipol y la mar. All because the sea ate the beach. Careyes, hundreds of meters of sand in all directions, warmth of talcum powder between our toes, where we dug ourselves up to our necks, played war, climbed on black cliffs, and dove from them, where we rode the waves, our parents unaware, to where our feet could no longer reach. The sea rocked us. It held and sustained us. The sea was always there. But one day the machines arrived. They drove piles and built walls dressed in hibiscus and bougainvillea. They erected towers, dug pools bluer than the ocean blue. They named Hotel Carelles after the last hawksbill nesting on its beaches. The paradise of delight was open to all who could pay. Everyone smiled and dispersed pictures of the nation's heroes on little papers. And the sea churned. It bellowed its ire at the stone that was not stone, the glued up gravel. It licked the cement. It spat at the walls, spewed insults of seaweed and jellyfish. It rose and climbed, ate a centimeter of beach. The next year, one more. Erosion, pronounced the solemn engineers rushing to reinforce the levees, burrowed deeper. The sea hurled waves. It invaded the lobbies of luxury hotels. Its irate hurricanes inundated the polished Carota floors, stole Persian rugs. When it shattered the windows of jewelry stores, rivers of pearl and coral returned to sea. The wind kidnapped dogs from the laps of distinguished ladies who, de donde nos visitan. Such was the clamor in the paradise that was Carelles Hotel and Resort. Until one day, exhausted from holding tons of steel and cement, the sand renounced her destiny as blonde Atlas, abandoned herself to the depths, and let the great blue cover her. Under it all, sea and sand, remember that before time was time, she, the enormous, had been alone, round, weeping her blue solitude. The sand's return also saddened Musnipol, the oldest turtle in the world, because in the beginning only she, Laud, had pitied the great blue. All Musnipol, with 7 lute strings on her leather back, the lone mariner who in the beginning had descended to the depths and murmured distant songs into the great blue's ear. The leatherback promised the sea a companion, firm and joyful, sunny and sweet. She took a clump of sand and carried it to the surface. She took another clump and another. Clumps created mounds, hills, mountains. That is how Mother Musnipol presented the great blue with a warm companion to caress with her waves. She gave us a home where we could walk, climb, dwell. She gave us earth, but we broke her, and earth returned to sea. So that is the preface. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on. So this is a story about a young woman who is a Mexican woman who is studying music in the United States, but she has to go back home on an emergency because her uncle is missing and her mom is very ill. And there she discovers all kinds of nastiness, and some of it is related to her own family. And that includes personal nastiness from her very conservative mom when she falls in love with her with a woman, with her childhood friend. And so now I'm jumping all the way to the end of the novel, and here you see her, Mariana, the protagonist, with her girlfriend, Fernanda, and they have been working on sea turtle conservation. And that's what you see here. The full moon bestowed a fantastical glow on the vast beach. Fernanda and I would spend the night monitoring turtles as usual, but little was common. We had flown into Oaxaca City, taken a 14-hour bus ride to Pochutla, and then bounced in the bed of a pickup truck over the pothole road to Mazunte. Some 20 of us stepped out of trucks in hushed excitement. Everyone wore long sleeves and pants despite the humidity. Some covered their faces with mosquito netting that gave their heads eerie elephant shapes. No perfume or insect repellent on this date, Reina, Fernanda had told me. She ran up a dune. At the top, she threw her arms open and shouted, "Do you know what Mazunte means? Please lay eggs. This will be an orgy." Indeed, that night, the golfinas, the turtles, staged a reproductive fest. By the time we reached the intertidal zone, the widest I had ever seen, the little hookers were busy. "Golfina," I yelled. The turtle was covering her nest, turning around already, and labored toward the water. I was moved. This turtle had come to the place where she was born, a link in a chain of life from the beginning of time. She evaded the poachers and the long-line trawlers. She learned to sleep in decimated seagrasses, to evade plastic bags, and even to diet so she could keep her date with the future. She had just laid 218 eggs, I counted, and now she was back in the relative safety of the ocean. I took a long view of the beach. On the slope where I stood, some 10 turtles surrounded me. Just beyond that were 10 more. Farther still, I saw some 20, then 50. I panned the expanse and saw hundreds and more hundreds. The farthest one seemed pebbles. My eyes could not make out the end of this beach, the largest I had ever seen. The turtles are dancing, I shouted. Hundreds of mothers were covering their nests. They tamped the sand with a pendular motion, and it was loud. I held Fernanda, my hands on her shoulder blades. A rumble climbed up my feet, stronger every instant. It surrounded us like an earthquake. She tilted her head and kissed my mouth. The tremors ran up my body, accelerating the pulse in my throat. You're not afraid of people anymore, Reina? I'm skipping lots of parts. After our colleagues left in the early morning, we walked toward the water and took off our shorts and shirts. I had brought snorkeling gear. I pointed toward the wind-carved promontory. I hear the reef around that point is full of sponges, I said. I bet we'll find musniquipacal, that's the hawksbill sea turtle. I spat into a mask and rubbed it with seawater, offered it to Fernanda. Ready, love? I'm tired. Fernanda yawned as she undid her braid and plopped on her back in the water, arms extending to her sides, from her sides. Her hair floated straight in all directions, forming a circle like a huge, soft sea urchin. I just want to float and drift. Come on, party pooper. What if we find musnipol? Fernanda stretched her limbs. Okay, let's make it short. The sky was rosy in the east. We coasted the first cove, swung around the point, and passed a coral cemetery where the water was warmer. White coral, no sponges, no fish, no snails. An underwater silence. Piles of skeletons like a wet Chernobyl. No bubbles, no pops, no snaps, no sand waterfalls. We passed the sickly ruins as quickly as we could, and again found cool water and schools of fish in agate, cobalt, mango yellow. Holding hands, Fernanda and I sought the sponge and anemone forest where musniquipacal might feed. An octopus slithered on the coral, and Fernanda picked it up. It wrapped its tentacles around her arm and poked her ear, made us laugh underwater. Then he tried to catch our bubbles. When she put him down, she showed me the purple marks of many suction cups. Then everything changed. The sea turned dark as though a cloud had covered the sun. But the cloud was in the water, and it enveloped us. Then it pulverized. Every tiny section turned toward the sun and became millions of mirrors. It was a school of sardines, a glittering cloud, dense as a net, blanketing us in its nimble progression. I circled Fernanda's waist. Our bodies rubbed gently as we swam with one arm each. Around us, an entourage of shooting stars, eddies upon sparkling eddies, making more smaller eddies, and those more. They were showing us the way. We followed them along the coast. I pulled Fernanda gently along. We slowed down, and the fish did too. Fernanda came to the surface, took her mask off, and yawned. I can't. I'll see you on shore, love. I took my mask off too. I held her and kissed her like the first time. We stopped moving for a moment and we dipped, kissing underwater. Around us, the fish made a circle of light. Then Fernanda swam away and the silver cloud parted, some going with her. As I went around the point, the other cloud followed me. In the ocean, we were always together. I swam through the river of light. A black and gold moray eel flashed her needle-like teeth, then retreated into her den. And then I caught my breath. There rushed Golfina. Lost in the dance of silver, the turtle flew her fins like wings, entangling dainty fish in her turbulence. She browsed the coral, unconcerned with the glittering sea. or with me. I came up, Fernanda, Golfina. I listened for her. I heard the breeze. With her shining entourage, the turtle coasted toward open sea. One stroke of her graceful fins took her farther than many of my kicks. I raised my face above the water. The surface was a mirror. I called, I swam, I followed Golfina, and the fish followed me. I looked. Fernanda had to be somewhere. I swam around the boulder into a small valley of sand and grasses surrounded by rocks and coral. The cloud of fish led me to long, black strands of seagrass floating from the floor 5 feet below. I dove to reach the source of the caressing strands. The fish parted in whirlpools of light. A scream grew inside me. On the bed of swaying grass, Fernanda rested. Her gaze penetrated my heart. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Estela, for that wonderful, wonderful reading. And now to our next reader. Alison McLennan, a graduate of the University of Utah and the Solstice MFA in Creative Writing program, is the author of 2 historical novels, Ophelia's War and Ophelia's War, Dangerous Mercy, as well as a coming-of-age crime story, Falling for Johnny. Her work has won honorable mentions in the Utah Original Writing Competition and the Incubate Literary Blockbuster Contest. Some of her poems have been published by the Sandwich Arts Alliance and the state of Utah. Her current project is about a 2019 solo trip to Nepal. And now we welcome Alison.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Okay, all right. This is from something completely different that I'm working on. Edgewalkers, 1971. On the feast of St. John the Baptist, St. John's Church in Quincy, Massachusetts hosts a carnival. Sugar-crazed children dance in circles while waving pink gooey torches of cotton candy in the humid air. They beg their fathers to play balloon and dart or the milk bottle game so they can win giant polyester stuffed animals whose bulging eyes will later feature in their nightmares. Clusters of women gossip and steal glances at the tan, muscular arms of Father Giovanni in short sleeves. A soon-to-be-born baby girl smells the greasy scents of pizza, fried dough, and burned popcorn from her mother's womb. She decides she doesn't want to come out and is attempting a reverse course somersault in amniotic fluid when her father Harold wins the most coveted raffle prize that year, an AM/FM radio. Harold holds the claim slip in his sweaty palm and makes his way to the podium. His pregnant wife, Pauline, will certainly complain that he has spent almost as much money on raffle tickets as the radio is worth. So on the way back, he takes a lengthy detour at the bake sale table where he devours a slice of blueberry pie from a soggy plate. Meanwhile, Pauline feels intense movement in her womb as if her baby is turning. Warm amniotic fluid gushes down her legs. Panicked, yet grateful about her choice of a skirt over trousers, she grips the handle of the baby carriage containing their 18-month-old son, Paul, and wonders where the hell Harold has gone. From a distance, Harold sees Paul's chubby leg dangling out of the carriage in a poorly executed escape attempt. He runs over and scoops up Paul just in time to catch him. Oh, Pauline moans, Harold, where have you been? Harold juggles Paul, waves the paper in the air and grins. We won. We won a brand new radio. I'm in labor. She gestures to the ground. My water just broke. Thank God I was standing over here by myself on the grass. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. The catch is they don't have the radio here. We have to pick it up at the radio station in Boston before 5 o'clock today, or it'll be forfeited. Hey, you know what? It's on the way to the hospital. We can make a quick stop and pick it up. Harold and Pauline have spent months arguing about baby names. While Pauline labors a breech birth, Harold drinks too much at the bar next to the hospital. He writes a strange name on his daughter's birth certificate. Later, he can't remember what he wrote. He just knows that it was something he shouldn't have. Pauline calls the baby Debbie, and Harold never corrects her. Brother Paul, although just a toddler, is preternaturally versed in Boston-style sarcasm and a little resentful about being upstaged by a baby, so he calls his sister Baby in a derisive tone. Pauline and Harold follow his lead and also call her Baby. After a few months, Baby is shortened to B, and for the first years of her life, B knows no other name. B's parents are devout Catholics. Church families often flock to their house for Sunday dinner. Sometimes priests come too, donning black and white suits, which remind B of penguins. They chain smoke, drink wine, and all talk at once in loud Boston accents, dropping R's from words, only to add them to other words where they have no business. At these Sunday gatherings, B either avoids the adults completely or pretends to be a dog, jumps onto their laps, and licks their faces. The majority of adults push her away. The only adults who tolerate having their faces licked are bearded men. But their faces are too yucky even for a girl dog, so B mostly plays with the other children and secretly stares at the priest from across the room. Around Christmas time of her 5th year, there's a Sunday gathering at her house. B sits on the living room floor with a boy reading a big picture book. Their 4 feet jut out of the large book, which extends almost to their ankles. Torn wrapping paper and a few unwanted toys from a gift exchange that has just taken place lay strewn on the floor. The adults sit around the dining room table in an alcove at the other end of the room. The little boy's father walks over, lights a cigarette, and observes B and his boy. B reads better than you, son, and she's only in kindergarten. He laughs, takes a long drag on his cigarette, and blows smoke through his nose like a cartoon bull. B feels the boy's hurt, inches a little closer to him, and tries to ignore his father. B? Is B your real name? She glances up at him, shrugs her shoulders, and continues reading. He bellows over to her parents at the dining table. Say, is B her real name or a nickname? Nickname, calls Pauline. Her real name is... Pauline and Harold respond simultaneously. Deborah Murgatroyd. The chatter stops and everyone pays attention. Pauline's jaw tenses and her eyes narrow. Harold. He turns to the priest. I confess, I had too much to drink the day she was born, and I wrote Murgatroyd on her birth certificate. Please forgive me. Pauline waves her finger in the air and then points at Harold. Oh, no. You don't get to make confessions because we have a priest over for dinner. Save it for the confessional. She stands and clears plates from the table. Ha, very funny. She shakes her head and grimaces. Bob, don't listen to him. He's just kidding. Her name's Deborah, but we've been calling her B since she was about a week old. Bob's face is frozen in comic book surprise. He lets out a loud laugh, shakes his head, whistles in mock relief, and turns to B. For a minute there, I thought your name was Murgatroyd. That would be something. The adults make faces, laugh nervously, and then carry on with their conversations. So, Debbie Murgatroyd, says Bob, searching for a suitable topic of conversation, what do you want to be when you grow up? My name isn't Debbie Murgatroyd. My name is B. And when I grow up, I want to be a saint. Bob chokes on a cigarette smoke and collapses with laughter. His belly jiggles and his whole body shakes as he wheezes and gasps for air. A woman calls from the dining table. Hey, Bob, what's the matter? Are you okay over there? Holy shit, are you having a heart attack? Oh, excuse me, Father, she whispers to the priest next to her. Bob's wife shakes her head and rolls her eyes. He's fine. That's just how he laughs. When he recovers from his fit of hilarity, he calls over to the adults. Get a load of this. I asked B what she wants to be when she grows up, and she said, a saint. All the adults crack up, even the priest. Some of them cry because they're laughing so hard. B feels sick. The boy she's been reading with looks sorry for her, yet grateful they aren't laughing at him. She sneaks out of the room and creeps up the stairs to her bedroom. The cruel, booming sound of laughter follows. She takes her big book of saints from the shelf, steps into the closet, stands on her tippy toes, pulls the light switch on, sits down cross-legged, opens the book and turns the pages. She doesn't recognize many words, so she traces the halos around the saints' glowing heads with her index finger. Oh, honey, her mother later explains, they weren't laughing at you. They were laughing with you. But I wasn't laughing. I really do want to be a saint when I grow up. Why is that so funny? Her mother sighs in exasperation, shakes her head, and picks up the big book of saints. Well, okay, to be a saint, you have to perform a miracle first. Not only that, the miracle must be documented. And if you manage that, you also have to die a martyr. What's a martyr? A martyr is someone who's tortured and dies for their beliefs. She thumbs through the book. Listen to this. Joan of Arc, burned at the stake. St. Margaret, pressed to death. St. Catherine, burned at the stake. St. Cecilia, stoned and then beheaded. St. Susanna, gored by a bull and then beheaded. The list goes on and on. So if you want to become a saint, you have to perform a miracle and become a martyr. Do you think you can handle that? No, why do I have to? That's just the way it is, honey. I didn't make the rules. Bee hides her face in her hands. Oh, Bee, stop crying. There are plenty of other things to be when you grow up. Don't be so sensitive. Why do you want to be a saint anyway? I'll show you. Bee reaches out for the book. Her mother hands it to her and sighs at the slow, clumsy way she turns the pages. Come on, Bee, I have to get supper started. Bee points to the circle around one of the saints' heads. I want one of those around my head. A halo? Oh, Bee, that's not real anyway. It's just the artist's depiction to show how holy they are. Mommy, why did that man, Bob, call me movement toy? Okay, I'm going to just stop there. Sorry about my son decided to take a shower the minute I started reading. I hope you guys can hear me.
Thank you so much, Alison, for that wonderful reading. And for the voices, too. I enjoy when there's voices that are in there. And now for our final reader. Mike Miner lives and occasionally writes in Connecticut. He is the author of 4 novels and 2 short story collections. He has been published or has his work forthcoming in Spine Tingler, Narrative, Pank Magazine, Pulp Metal Magazine, The Flash Fiction Offensive, Shotgun Honey, and Solstice, a magazine of diverse voices. He received his MFA from Solstice in January of 2011. Mike, welcome to the virtual floor.
Thank you very much. Everybody hear me okay? Okay. 2011, man, long time ago. So this is from my last novel, True Dark. And this was the first thing I ever wrote for this novel. It was a story that got published years before it turned into a novel, but it kind of started this world, and it was knocking around in my head for years. So it was kind of neat to go back and think about where it all began. And it was the first chapter for years, and then I added another chapter ahead, but we'll give that a whirl. So it was a land of dust and scrubgrass, sand and rock, punished by the sun, forgotten by God. Maybe it was California. But by the time you made it down this busted up road, it was hard to remember what country you were in. Might be Mexico or hell. Then Sally's Airstream Diner appeared like a mirage out of the desert, shining like a massive bullet. But it was real. The old man pulled his rented Chevy sedan into the dirt lot and parked next to a lonely Toyota Tercel. The car engine made angry noises, and the air conditioning was just a weak, warm coughing. The old man savored it before turning off the ignition. He picked up a Stetson hat and the pistol underneath it off the cracked leather passenger seat and stepped into the oven of a day. The early sun, molten red and low on the horizon, seemed close enough to walk to. The old man was still getting used to the sight of it, For 30 years, he'd only seen the sun when it had risen above the prison walls that surrounded him. The American Southwest, where a man could see the horizon in every direction, was overwhelming and disorienting in its vastness. A rattling air conditioner kept the inside of the trailer under 100. A bored waitress watched the old man walk slowly to the counter and sit. He put his hat on the stool next to him. She was in her 20s, he guessed. Wore no makeup and didn't need any. Her hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail, was sun-bleached blonde. An adorable cluster of freckles decorated her nose and cheeks. Her eyes were big and green. Behind her, a Mexican kid was cooking bacon and home fries. Morning, he said. Morning, she squinted at him. We don't get a lot of out-of-towners around here. Is that a fact? She nodded. Start you with a coffee? The thought of coffee made him perspire, but he nodded. Menus on the board. Are you Sally? She grinned, shook her head, poured his coffee. The old man nodded, as if the last thing had fallen into place. When is Salvador due in? I expect him directly. If she was surprised by the old man's knowledge of her boss's real name, she didn't show it. The old man used his napkin to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Maybe late 20s, he thought, just a touch of world weary in her green eyes. She might have learned a hard lesson or two in her short life, probably from a man. 25 years ago, the old man had just started to get old. The young lions in the pen had turned on him, as was natural, and his anger had burned even brighter at the man who put him there. He hadn't killed anyone in a long time. That would change today. The more things went well, the surer he became. This time was different. In prison, it had been pure self-defense, him or them, no kind of choice involved except the choice to live. Before that, it had been business. He was paid large sums of money to end people's lives, mostly bad guys who had it coming, pimps, drug dealers, racketeers. Not always. He could be honest about that. Not everyone he killed went to hell. He wouldn't go so far as to say he regretted killing a few innocents. It paid just as well, better on occasion. The world had taught him to accept that bad things happened to good people. So what if he was the bad thing? But he took no pleasure in it. He remained professional. Not today. Today was different. He would take pleasure in this, savor it. Yes, there was money in it, but that wasn't the point. He would gladly have done this for free. Hell, he would have paid his fee for this target's whereabouts. Thoughts of how he would do it had given him comfort over the years in prison. Some men imagined women, girlfriends, or wives. Late at night, alone in his cell, he imagined murder scenarios. His favorite fantasy, though not practical, was strangulation. Being able to watch Sally's eyes bulge as he fought for oxygen. The old man smiled and looked at his wrinkled, arthritic hands. Couldn't squeeze the life out of a pigeon now. Oh well, he could still pull a trigger. Outside, the rumble of an engine, tires crunching gravel. That'd be him, she said. Why don't you take a smoke break? I don't smoke. The old man placed a pack of Marlboros and a book of matches on the counter. Good time to take it up. What's the cook's name? Angel. Take him with you. The girl waited a moment, then took the cigarettes and left with Angel in tow through the kitchen. The old man heard the slap of a screen door. Salvador's tan skin was leather, his hair lamb's wool. He was heavier, like he'd been living well. Good. Sal sighed when he saw the old man. Hey, Sal. Hey, Teddy. You're a hard man to find. Sal shrugged. The old man pulled the revolver out of his pants and put it on the counter. Everything felt unreal, dreamlike. Such a long time coming. I've often wondered how this would go down. Me too. The waitress's name was Doris. She stood outside, felt the temperature rise with the sun. A man will come someday, Sal had said. Let him do what he has to do. Even though she expected it, the gunshot made her jump. And the second, and the third. Angel threw the half-smoked Marlboro she'd given him onto the ground and hopped into his ancient Chevy pickup, the engine coughed to life. Sounding like a man who couldn't catch his breath, he looked briefly at the girl, his eyes a question. She shook her head. Angel nodded, put the truck in gear, rumbled away. The old man stepped outside and put his Stetson on. She didn't see a gun. He handed her some cash, tipped his hat for the coffee. A wicked breeze kicked up, furnace hot. She turned her back and cupped her hands so she could light the first cigarette she'd smoked in years. Doris waited until the old man's car was out of sight before she went back inside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that wonderful reading. And a big thanks again to Joanne, Estela, Alison, and Mike. Let's now turn on our cameras and microphones and give them a big, audible round of applause.
Yay!
Thank you all for joining us this reading tonight. I wish you all a safe and happy rest of your evenings.